Now, we got volume, ain't it?
Oh, do we have... Well, we don't either. There's not any volume here.
Well, you're talking, you come together.
Well, there's no volume here, I can tell by the mic. There's no volume. Now there is. Now there is. Oh, the katydids. It's cha-cha-cha all the time. And I'm going to let Sam talk over... This is the telegraph.
Yeah. Well, this is a new experience for me. This is a new experience for me to try to help with one of these things. I just wondering how we'll sound whenever we play this back. Lee turned every knob on there. Lee, you better say something.
I don't know anything to say.
That'll be on there. That's like that. Let's see if we can hear ourselves talk.
We're going to have to learn how to play it back first.
Well,
Hey, stop this crazy thing.
Turn it off. Yeah, well now. You ready? About 1850, a New York banker, Edward Beyer, who entered several thousand acres of forest land along the northwest slope of Big Frog Mountain in Polk County. He had a number of Europeans organized to settle his land. M. Guerin organized a colony in Paris, France. It was composed of Frenchmen, German, English, Italian families. They crossed the Atlantic Ocean together to New York. From New York, they went to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and there engaged some Swedes to accompany them as laborers. From Pittsburgh, by way of Cincinnati, they came to Cleveland, Tennessee by railroad. From Cleveland, they traveled in wagons up the Ocoee River to the mouth of Silco Creek, there again fording the river. They went up the Silco Valley and up a foothill of Frog Mountain along a road the early settlers there had made. Though the land selected for their county site, the road makers
That's that ditch and cuts. Ditch and cuts.
Ditch cuts made the road to his land on Big Creek, about a mile from the main Silco Valley Road. There they established a town and called it Vineland.
As the Germans were Dutch-speaking and all spoke foreign languages, the settlers around there therefore called it the Dutch settlement. The name Vineland became all but lost, being remembered, however, by the Shabble boys, sons of A. Shabble, assistant agent for the colony. Mr. Guerin was the agent until his death, when Captain Shabble was his successor. William Mueller, a German, was a teacher, and his son Oscar W. Mueller became a professor of Hiawassee College in later years. John and Bandy Beckler, or Buckley, were German vineyardists. A descendant is now postmaster at Ducktown, Tennessee. The Kerbos were French and have descendants in Bradley and Polk County. Choplin Myolan and his mother were German, and he became a distiller near Benton. Fred Lintner was a German and became county clerk of Polk County, and his descendants are still living in Polk County. Edelweiss Weber was a German carpenter. His descendants made furniture, were blacksmiths, and later carriage men. A. Shabble was a Frenchman, and his son A. Jr. lives on the north end of Henley Street Bridge in Knoxville, Tennessee, and his summer home is at the south end of the Jack River Bridge in Georgia, not many miles from the now abandoned site of Vineland, he gave the most of the information about the Dutch settlement.
All the colonists were Catholics, and they built a church. A priest of the Cleveland church came regularly to preach for them. They built a mile or two of good roadway and planted flowers along it and built their houses along this one main street. The log houses were made of wide, short blocks pinned together end to end, making a round or circular house, or were of the usual square log cabin like the other pioneers. The company warehouse was round and large to hold supplies and to store wine and other products to be sent to market. The Swedes became dissatisfied and returned to Cincinnati in a year or two. The main surplus crop was wine made from grapes, but as it proved to be too foxy, it did not sell well in market, and the vineyards were allowed to go down, only enough being kept to supply the homes. Each settler was an artisan, and his sons followed in the same occupation, and to a large extent their descendants do so. They looked down in more ways than one upon the settlers of the lower lands around them, and called the lowlanders and themselves highlanders. They would not mix with them, nor marry among them, but the second generation mostly moved down and became part of the despised landowners, yet proud of their Highlander origin.
The colonists brought grape cuttings from Europe, also vegetables and flower seed. One of the favorite flowers, digitails or foxglove, ran wild, and much of it abounds around there now, but is unknown elsewhere in the mountains. By 1900, only one family remained in the former Dutch settlement. He was Bandy Beckler, an original settler's son. About 1920, the last family living there, a Curbo, moved to Silco Valley, and since then the settlement has been abandoned. Blaney Baker owned the remaining farm of the Dutch settlement and kept cattle there and sometimes saw deer among them. The area included in 1925 in the game refuge, and deer became most numerous tenants. Later, about 1935, this part was placed outside the refuge, and many large bucks were killed in the old fields of the Dutch settlement during the 10 days open season.
Start where he left off.
In 1852, Miss Rosine M. Parmentier, a sister of Edward Bayer's wife, came with others to visit the colony. They came by ship from New York City to Charleston, South Carolina, then by rail to Cleveland, Tennessee, then in a wagon to the colony.
He and old man Neil Hyde, were on opposite sides during the Civil War, and they always fought the war over every time they would meet. He'd always win.
Well, could he speak English? Could he speak English?
Yeah, what I mean, he could speak. He'd speak lots of it. In the day's time, when they
He was cute, He had a little goatee.
Yeah. He was a very proud old gentleman.
Oh yes, he would just comb that mustache and beard and comb his hair, and he'd go and look himself in the mirror every time he went through the house where the mirror was. He'd look at him.
He used to kid Sam when he was going to see your mother that the shortest way to Copper Hill was by Rogers Ferry.
Yeah, he told me though. He says, you picked out a good one. But she's all right. She's all right. But what I started to tell you about when the First World War broke out, why, he sympathized with Germany. And, of course, our country was more or less aligned with Germany in the beginning. And Mother and Dad got afraid for him to go over to Ducktown. He'd go down the streets and he'd just talk up a storm, you know, and he is strong for Germany. And they were people that were sympathizing with Germany after a few years of the war began to take them up and put them in prison or in stockade or in confinement. But he had 4 grandsons to go in the service, and after they got in there, why, he turned over and was for our country. That was after the sinking of the Lusitania. Charles and myself and 2 of the Ledford boys were the 4 grandsons he had.
You know, his mother is buried over is she over there at Reliance in that area? And his father is buried over where nearly on Silco. Which one is it? One is buried in one place and one's buried in the other place. His mother is the one that was buried over in that Reliance area because she was with his sister, Fed Lintner. His mother died over there and was buried there. And then Grandpa's mother. And then his father, our great grandfather, is buried over on Silco. And then, of course, Grandma Beckler is buried on Silco. And he's buried in
Alfonso?
Uh-huh. Alfonso.
Well, they spoke of a kind of a village over there. Was there actually a village?
Yeah, I don't know exactly where that was. It must have been up there on the...
Well, now the wine press was at Old Fort. It was down there in that area where they put their wine press up and made their wine. But, you know, when Mother and Dad moved off of the mountain down in that level place that they call the Hainty Bottom, there were several people living in that area. But up on the mountain, there were not many people at all.
Well, now the Shabbles lived down the creek below where Grandpa lived.
Yes.
And Knock-the-Rainy lived up the creek a little, just a couple of 100 yards out there where his house was. And then there was a house kind of south where we saw that little cleared place over there. And I don't know who lived there. It was nearby. And then there's other houses on down the Silco Creek before it plunges off of the mountain. There's a big high waterfall on that creek between the top and the where it gets.
Well, you know, the valley is pretty wide and is right long. It's a pretty good...
Well, that upper valley is, but it's just almost a gorge from there on, when it starts off the mountain down until it gets down in the valley.
You know, it's always been strange to me, though, why they came to that rough mountain country and settled back in the mountainous area.
Well, it was for the very purpose of putting out a vineyard. Mother said when she and Dad married, after they married, they stayed there at Grandpa's for a little
Few
while.
months.
And said that great-grandfather was then would take a basket and go out by the barn and get a basket of stable manure every time he went in the vineyard. And he had a little level place around each one of those vines. And he kept the fertilizer and kept it stirred up, you know, kept just as clean as it could be. And the last time we were over there, I walked out through all that, it kind of sloping up to there. And it had large pine trees on it, and it looked like it had been cut through there 6 or 8 years ago. There was a lot of stumps through there. But I just pictured in my mind what a vineyard would look like that. There must be 20 acres there that would be the nicest drainage for a vineyard. It wasn't steep, it just rolling.
It's rolling, yeah.
And there's where Mother said the vineyard was.
Who was the child? Oh, it was when Charles was born that Uncle Jim Kerbo went up to Grandpa's and Grandma's and told them they had a fine son-in-law. And Grandpa Beckler came down there just a huffing and a puffing and said, Jim Kerbo made a sad mistake. Said I had a son-in-law and he made a grandson.
Yeah, grand mistake. That was one of his terms. He told about, was Dad the oldest child? Or was it two
Aunt
girls?
Jeannie was older than Dad, and then Dad was the second child.
And then Uncle John.
Then Uncle John.
And
then Aunt Sarah. I believe Aunt Sarah was
Aunt
next.
Josie
Or
come in there.
Aunt Josie. Aunt
Yeah.
Josie was next. And then
I was thinking the girls were the...
Aunt Josie, and then Uncle Fed, then Aunt Sarah, then Uncle Will, and then Aunt Ella. Aunt Minnie, and then Aunt Ella.
Well, he was in service in the Civil War when Dad was born in 1863, and said they told on him that when he got word that he had a new son at home, said they told on him that he jumped 6 feet high. And of course, the little Dutchman could jump, but he couldn't jump that high.
When Aunt Ellen and Uncle Jim O'Neill married, Aunt Ellen was quite young, and he didn't know she was going to get married, so she slipped out and met Uncle Jim. He had a buggy, so they eloped, and they went off, got married, and Grandpa heard about it. He came with his gun. He says, I'll shoot the way they went. They got married then. She's about 16.
Well, Uncle John and Dad were the two older boys, and they did everything together, you know. And they always liked to talk about hunting, the things that they did when they were growing up. John liked to come to our house. Mother always liked to see Uncle John come.
Yeah, we loved Uncle John.
Yeah.
And you
He
know,
never did get married, you know.
strangely enough, with his mustache, when he drank buttermilk or drank coffee, I always liked to hear him.
He strained it, didn't he?
Well, was he the one that lived to be so old and lived down there near Benton, or down near Parksville?
No, that was Uncle Will. But Uncle Will was...
John was the old bachelor.
Yeah.
Uncle John was older than
He
Uncle
came to
Jim.
our house.
He came to our house. He's the one that lived and walked so far back in,
Yeah, we'd take him down the river.
Came down the river.
Down to Caney Creek, and he'd walk across that swinging bridge and then walk through the mountains over to Silco.
Was he going to Silco then?
Yeah.
He still lived back in Silco.
Yeah, Uncle Will.
Well, that was after I was born.
Yeah.
Well, Grandpa always rode the little train on the flume line. He would walk through the mountains, and he'd get on that little train on the flume line down there and ride up to the upper dam, and you all would meet him there and bring him up to our house.
What's the flume line?
It's a wooden river up there on the mountain.
Oh, you ride that?
He'd ride
There's
the
a railroad on top
There's a
of it.
little dicky up there, train.
And he was 80 years old when he did that.
You thought he'd get in a boat and ride down there?
She wrote in her diary an account of the trip, and especially interesting is her account of the settlement. She wrote of going over the disused road and that his bridges had almost rotted down. He had made long, narrow bridges with logs stood on ends for piers across the deep valleys between the short ridges. These were so high that the bridges were among the treetops and the ravens. The roads now end abruptly on each side of these ravens where his bridges were, and so there remains no signs of the bridges. The road looks like parts of a road never completed or connected together.
In 1856, Dr. A.W. Ganger, state geologist, and some other state officials from Nashville, Tennessee visited Vinland one trip to copper mining country, and they called it a model village and suggested that other colonies be established like it, and that other citizens may provide by visiting the settlement and learning and emulating the thrifty methods there used.
When the Civil War came on, several of the young men of the Dutch settlement joined the Confederate armies, and A.A. Schabel rose to the rank of captain in the service. After the war, they did not all come back, and the population began to decrease, but kept up as a farm community, until in 1899, when J. Houston O'Neill, an ex-Confederate soldier, and Bandy Beckler were the only families living there. Reports of the first settler in the region then, that when Mr. Duchess went back to New York, was probably the cause of Mr. Bayer starting the colonization movement. That's all. Now let's play.
Well, we went to eat that night, and Grandmother had sweet potatoes, baked sweet potatoes, and those little red ones like we used to, long Spanish, pale red ones, you know. And I started getting me a potato, and I started to get the biggest one. And Dad and Charlie looked at me, you know, and I put it back, and she said, "Now, if you want that potato, you take it."
Who said that?
Grandma did. And I ate the big potato, you know. Then the next morning, when we started out with the hogs, we came out the trailway to the old paste place, and the pathway, the little hills called the little ridges come off there. The trail would go way around up the head of the ridge and around the point and back just like that, you know. Well, Grandpa, he had a sack of, he had a little pouch of corn hung around his shoulder, and he was dropping grains of corn in the trail, and the hogs were coming along picking up those grains and keep falling along, and he was calling just as loud as he could call it, and he got so far ahead he got out here. We couldn't hear him, but he kept going. He came with us over the Big Creek, and then we drove the hogs up across the mountain. Charles and I got tired, and climbing those steep mountains, we'd get the hog by the tail and make her pull us up the mountain. But we brought them through in one day.
There must have been a lot of big hogs.
They were big. They were real nice.
How old were you then?
Oh, I must have been about 13 or 14. Must have been about 1908 or 9, somewhere along there.
And were you living at Grass Creek or
down at the old place?
Down at the old place, yeah.
Congress's old place. And that old man Nockerini, he was a kind of a character. Mother thought a lot of him. He was no bachelor, and he lived next door to Grandfather.
he was Italian?
He was the Italian. Mother said that she remembered they were talking one day about dreams. He said, yes, dreams was a funny thing. Said a man would dream of things that he would never think of in 1,000 years.
Do you know the story about him voting that time?
No.
During that one of their election times, why both Democrats and Republicans would try to get him to vote for them, and so he went to the polls, and a Republican would get a hold of him and give him maybe a bag of flour, and the Democrat would get a hold of him, maybe give him a bucket of lard, and another Republican would give him something, and another one would give him something. So Mother said long in the afternoon, way late in the afternoon, he came in just loaded down. She was sitting on the porch, and he came by. She said, well, Nockerini, who did you vote for? He says, see, Mrs. Beckley, I didn't vote for any of them. Got loaded down, and then he came back home.
They didn't have much work to do to earn any money. But when fall of the year came, why, they had fodder pulling. And all the people in the Dutch settlement would go down on the Ocoee River, down in the river bottoms, and pull fodder. And Grandpa, he was one of the fastest, and he called and he'd always tell him, said, now you've got to keep up with the little Dutchman. And said he'd get ahead and get out 20 steps ahead. Said he'd holler, push the leader. And said he pulled ahead all the time. Said nobody could keep up with the little Dutchman. And he was just that way too. He could remember the best of anybody I ever saw. He could remember when he started talking about people. Before he ever told what he started, and he'd give you a full history of them. He'd tell you the color of the eyes they had, and the color of their hair, and who they married, and where he saw them last, and then he'd go ahead and tell. And he was at was it Gettysburg? Vicksburg, where they
where he was wounded.
Yeah, where they kept the city under siege there for a long time. And he could tell you the name of every river that he ever crossed during the Civil War. It'd beat anything I ever heard. He could name every one of them.
And the general he loved so well was Stonewall Jackson.
Yeah.
Did he have a full brother?
I don't think he did. I think he was the only child.
No, he had a sister.
Did he have a full sister?
And the sister married Fred Lintner.
Lintner.
Fred Lintner was the one, you know, that was shipped out of Germany in a barrel until he got out on the ocean. He was supposed to have been a barrel of flour.
John says he's a stowaway.
Yeah. Mike Cranston did.
Well, Grandpa couldn't read English. He read his German Bible. Could he read English at all? If he did, I just never did hear about it. But he certainly could read that German Bible. And when he started reading in it, Mother said that when he came to Jacob, he would say Jacob. Joseph, he'd say Joseph. And
I don't remember.
Did he read the newspapers?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But he would listen to others talk, you know, and he was well informed and kept up with all sorts of things. And he always would win the battle.
Establish a colony. And when they came up the river and finally just to find the place, they finally landed on the mountain. Now, I don't know whether that's an authentic story or where I just made it up, but it sounds good to me. Another thing, going back talking about grandfather, was that being a little old shaver running around and admiring him, his memory and all these things, every time we went to the table and to have our meal, after he got through, he always picked up a little piece of bread and he'd roll it in between his thumb and his forefinger on one hand till it got tired, and then he'd change it over into the other hand.
What did he call it?
A noodle. And he'd run that little piece of dough or bread till it got just as black as it could be, and you dare not say anything about that noodle. That was his business, and it was okay for everybody. Then go back to when the boys were in the army. You know, grandfather couldn't read any English, but he would meet the mailman. Usually came in on a little buggy, and he would stop him, and anything that Mr. Dalton heard in Ducktown about the war, why, he had to tell him. And then when we got the paper, why, we had to read all about what was in it, and then he could almost tell you word by word what you read. And he had such a memory.
You take your memory from him?
No, I'm afraid I don't. I can hardly remember who I married, let alone tell what her color of her eyes was and her hair, or where'd she come from.
I don't believe that. Tell me this, did you inherit any of your deer hunting abilities from him?
Oh, I think so. I don't know whether grandfather was such a hunter or not, but I know my dad and Uncle John and the other boys were great hunters. And now I have quite a reputation of being a deer hunter, but I'll never live to kill the deer that my dad killed. I know he has told me that he killed 75 deer and 1 bear. And I don't know what the wild turkeys that he killed.
How did he happen to kill the bear?
Well, the bear story kind of goes something like this, that it was during the big snow, and previous to this bear had been invading the hog lot and catching the pigs, and during the snow he happened not be hibernated, so they tracked him way on the mountain, and finally found where he'd gone in under a big log. And Dad said he couldn't see him by standing on the log, so he got on the steep ground in below him, and he could see him back in kind of a cave place. And he shot him with an old-fashioned hog rifle, and that was the only bear that he ever killed.
Did he kill it instantly, or did...
As far as I know, I don't think it ever come out of its den. I think he killed it instantly.
Could his gun have been reloaded? Had he not killed it with the first shot?
Not that quick if the bear could have come out, but he was evidently a good shot, a much better shot than some of his sons.
Well, tell us about your mother and her.
Well, I get my deer hunting skill on both sides. Of course, I've never drowned one yet, but I have run them into the river and lakes, a few of them. She tells this story of the men folks out hunting and the hounds bringing in a big buck and baying it down in the field in the bend of the Silco in quite a pool of water. And her and one of Dad's sister, was it grandmother, went down while the dogs was baying it, and each one got a rail and put it through his antlers and drowned the buck, so they had the meat when the men folks got in home after the hunt.
I think Aunt Vina was in on that.
I think so too.
And your wife would have been trying to get the deer away.
That's right, she'd have been.
That's because she wasn't wanting it to eat.
Yeah.
I heard how many deer did Uncle Dan go for to kill? No, bears.
I really don't know. There is another bear story about Knockerini, wasn't it? And crawling down in the tree. The bear went in the hollow tree, and he climbs down in it, and the bear comes out by him, and he grabs the bear with the tail and sticks his hunting knife in it, and the bear pulls him out, and he kills the bear with his knife. Now, there's a good story there about it.
No, I think that's one of David Crockett's stories.
No.
You just patched that up.
No, that's a real old. That's a real old.
That's getting told.
That's a real old Dutch settlement story.
Oh, what's her been up to?
He must have been sampling some of Uncle Foley's wine.
No, that's a good story.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
But they were great hunters, and they hunted for meat because it was survival of the fittest. And now then we hunt for sport. Oh, there's more to that Knockerini bear tale that I was talking about a while ago than I got in. The reason he went down the tree was he's going down after a cub that is in the tree. And while he was down trying to get the cub in a sack, the old mother bear come home and found him down the tree. And so she backed down right down on top of him. And the story was that he grabbed her by the tail and stuck his hunting knife in her, and she drug him back out out to daylight or out on the top of the tree. And the funny part of the whole story was something that Nacarini said, and I don't remember now what that saying was. But anyhow, it was a good story for us children to listen to when we were small.
Better than Daniel Boone.
Oh, it was a real David Crockett story. Better cut.
Jimmy leaves the mic.
What'd you say, Charles? One kind word. Keeps
I
you
said
warm for 3
one
winters.
I said one kind word will keep you warm for 3 winters.
What kind of jar is that? Looks like one
Oh,
of
that
the
was
old
over
blankets.
in China. This grandmother told her grandson about the lost land in China.
I'd say a little blanket would be better.
A word.
With an electric unit in it. Or a lot of good hickory wood.
Yeah, hickory wood.
It's easy to put it
What?
there.
What? You forgot the match, didn't you? You don't expect hickory wood to keep you warm all by itself, do you? Unless you fall down.
Doug, do you play basketball?
Yeah.
Were you on the first team in football?
There for a while I was.
How did your team come out this year?
Not too good. We had about 3-7 ranked. I think it's good.
Well, sophomore playing on the team.
Yeah. We just barely lost Copper Basin.
You mean you let Copper Basin beat you?
Yeah.
Barely. 13 points, that's all.
Have y'all had any barbecues lately, Clay?
No, we haven't had this in summer.
Well, y'all have some, especially during December.
No, we didn't have very many this summer, not as many as we used to do. I think you better erase that tape and start over with something sensible. Hey, I tell you, play it back and see what we got.
Hey, you
Spooks of all types passed in and out of the Concord ashram. Even the clean woman had revelations. And though the Hindus frowned on psychism and yoga, it was obvious that the two went together, Western style. We were besieged by witches, fortune tellers, astrologers, psychic researchers. Marcia's daughter, Louie, with the aid of her Hebrew lessons, read a mean tarot card. I tried to bring Snake home tonight, but Mother wouldn't let me. I sure would like to know why. If I can't have a dog, I can't have a snake.
Well, I'd like to tell you that I'm afraid of snakes, and I don't want them in my house. I don't want to have to sleep with them. And I don't want to have to sweep them out from under your bed. So what you got to say to that?
Well, they're clean.
They're not pretty to look at.
They're
How do you
friendly.
like snakes, Effie? Out of my sight.
They're not bad if you keep them in a box.
I'd rather have frogs around my house.
I figure if I can work long enough on the snake, Mother will probably decide to let me have a dog sooner or later.
Not till you're grown and married.
And that's good.
Well, that big.
Oh, about 10 years, I guess.
No, it will be that long.
I like dogs, but I don't want any here because I figure I'd have everybody else's dogs and cats too. So I don't want too many animals around.
away in the manger, no crib for a bed. The
Lord Jesus laid down his sweet head. The stars in the sky looked down where he lay. The little Lord Jesus asleep on the hay.
Hey, don't have any headphones.
Conform to Christ in a witness to fellow students. We find the meaning of conform from the dictionary to be, to act, to law or rule, be in agreement with generally acceptable standards of business, law, conduct, or worship. We find therefore that to conform, one does adjust to that which is acceptable under situations that they are confronted with. From a worldly concept of the word conform, I am sure that you have often heard the phrase, when in Rome, do as Rome does. The meaning of conform that I would like to speak about tonight concerns the adjustment that the Christian makes and the witnessing effect of the conformed Christian students to his or her fellow classmates. Briefly, I would like to mention a number of ways in which a conformed Christian student can witness. First is our attitude. The Christian student's attitude will always be one that is acceptable at all times. Attitude becomes a part of his or her personality. Whether or not the ballgame score was favorable, or even though the hardest subjects seem to always receive those long assignments, or in the opposite, when the weather is good and everything seems fine, attitude in all these situations will be noted. The Christian student's attitude will therefore be acceptable at all times. This attitude will be observed, will be admired, and will be noted by fellow students. The attitudes shown by Christian students contribute to witnessing for Christ as we study, attend classes, and participate in other college activities. Our everyday speech, our daily conversation, is another way that we are known. Some like to talk a lot, while others say very little. Some like to choose well their words and expressions. Many students seem to want to talk at every opportunity. I recently heard of a good farmer in Monroe County who liked to talk. His neighbor friends knew how he enjoyed to talk, so the two friends decided to see if they could keep him talking all day. It was spring and the farmer was very busy. Early one morning, as this good farmer had completed the first round of plowing, one of his friends appeared and talked with him until noon. The friend left and the farmer ate his noon meal. As the farmer returned to the field, the other friend appeared as prearranged, and they talked until nightfall, in time to do the evening chores. This farmer liked to talk, but of course his desire to just talk is much greater than for most of us. To be able to express herself is a wonderful gift. It blends in with our seeing, hearing, and thinking. The point I want to make is that the conformed Christian student will certainly enjoy talking, but his or her speech will always be acceptable. I believe that his or her conversation would contribute to witnessing for Christ when the right situation presents itself. The student's expressed interest in life's ambition, as well as in civic, political, and religious activities, is another way that the Christian student can witness for Christ. What doth the Lord require of thee but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God? Micah 6:8. It is this walking with God that to some will seem unnecessary and unreal. Walking with God. Why is that necessary? Why does God will that for us? First, God yearns for us to walk with Him because we are the children of His love. Second, God longs for our fellowship, not only because He cannot be satisfied without us, but because He knows that we cannot be satisfied without Him. Christ was loved and followed wherever He traveled on earth. I am sure the conformed Christian, this includes the college student, will be an effective witness for Christ.
Do not pass
Ye sinners poor and needy, weak and wounded, sick and sore, Jesus ready stands to save you, full of pity, love, and power. I will arise and go to Jesus. He will embrace me in His arms, in the arms of my dear Savior. Oh, thou art in 1,000 charms.
Sweet